Building a positive experience for employees has always been important, but it's especially vital for remote workers. Those who work remotely have proven an ability to be more productive and efficient when work is balanced with well-being. Their employers, however, often have to make some very difficult decisions in the face of an unsteady economic climate, making this balance even more difficult to achieve. For an in-depth discussion on this and more, please make some noise for the CEO and co-founder of WFHomie, Pavla Boboshikova.
No. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're enjoying Elevate as much as I am. So before jumping into how to create an exceptional employee experience, I'd like to focus briefly on why creating an employee experience that is really exceptional is important and how it impacts the business's bottom line. So it's no secret that employee experience or an exceptional employee experience can help companies save a lot of money. The way that this number, which looks pretty big, the way that you can check what that means for your own team is you can go visit allvoices.co. It's another HR tech company, and what they do is they help you calculate, based on your headcount and based on your salary, what is approximately the money your company is losing by not providing their employees with an exceptional experience. The areas that go into this are typically around performance, productivity, absenteeism that leads to turnover, and those things cost companies a lot of money. So to give you an example, a company of about 100 people, if they just do not invest anything into providing a good employee experience, they're looking to lose somewhere around or north of $1 million a year. Another way of calculating this number is simply looking at employee salary and the percentage of that gets lost if the employee leaves prematurely. For most companies, that means if somebody leaves within the first 2 years, that means that that company is losing somewhere between 50 to 150% of that employee's annual salary. What's more exciting is that providing an exceptional employee experience can actually help your company make more money. So typically, companies that have more engaged employees report higher profits. The reason for this is because employees that are more engaged tend to be performing better, tend to be more productive, and ultimately, they report higher loyalty from their customers. So ultimately, happy employees lead to happy customers. Before I dig into this deeper, it would probably make sense to define what employee experience is. So the way we define that at WFHomie is the experience that employees perceive. It's basically how employees perceive their relationship with their employer based on the interactions they have. And it can be further broken down into specific segments that, depending on the school of thought, those might slightly differ, but there's big overlaps. Those would be D&I, opportunities for growth, teamwork, communication, workload, trust in leadership, alignment with company's values, clarity on the company's direction, relationship with direct manager, and categories as such. So again, why does employee experience matter? Not just because, generally speaking, treating people well is a good thing to do, and of course leads to creating a better place. But ultimately, it impacts the bottom line. It can help your company make more money by generating more productive employees and happier customers, and it can help your company save money by not losing out on absenteeism and premature attrition. So when it comes to unfortunate events such as layoffs, it is especially important to pay attention how the company is treating their employees and how they're managing the entire layoff event. As you know, the list of companies that are currently going through layoffs is unfortunately growing. I assume there might be people among us who are impacted. I was once earlier in my career impacted as well, and it definitely sucks. However, it's important to keep in mind that layoffs are simply the result of poor planning, and planning is extremely hard to do, so no shade on companies. However, it is not personal, and by definition, is not related to performance. So when it comes to a layoff, there are things that companies should do and should not do. A great example of what not to do is post selfies of crying CEO saying, looking for sympathy and looking for a pat on the back. In terms of what to do and what to focus on, there's actually a great chapter in Ben Horowitz's book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, where he highlights that the number one thing that companies should really pay attention to during layoffs is communication and making sure that everything is properly timed and that their HR is ready to answer any and all questions that employees might have, such as what's going to happen to my benefits, what's going to happen to my insurance, and that the company is just very well prepared and ready. Because ultimately, right after a layoff, company is looking at a drop in morale, at wavering trust in leadership, and the number one question on everybody's mind is always going to be, am I next? And will there be another wave? And another bad example of how this was done was Klarna, when earlier this year in May, they had to let go of about 10% of their 7,000 people workforce. And unfortunately, what they did was they announced that there would be company-wide layoffs, but took a couple of days before the specific people learned that they're being laid off. And as you can imagine, that causes a lot of stress internally, and it's very bad practice. Another thing to keep in mind is not only to focus on how to support those that are leaving, so putting together a layoff list, helping them find new opportunities, but it's also focusing on those who stayed and how you can strengthen those relationships between them and make sure that the company preserves some form of culture. And then lastly, it's also key to remember that those that are leaving can still remain company's champions. And it's absolutely worth the investment to look at alumni groups, look at, can those employees still have access to that product or whatever the scenario might be. A good example of that, I think, is what, Simple has done. And you might see sometimes employees that have been let go on LinkedIn, oftentimes they say, obviously this is difficult and I'm looking for a new role, but I've had such a great opportunity at this company and I understand. So in terms of, now that we can't prevent layoffs, what can we do to manage employee experience throughout and to get insights? It is to ask employees what is it that actually matters to them, because there's no one-size-fits-all. So it is actually about investing into people, processes, and tools to collect that employee sentiment and understand how people are feeling all throughout. If the concept of employee experience is still a little non-specific to you, a great place to start is by collecting ENPS, or Employee Net Promoter Score. It's one of the cornerstone metrics that can help an employer understand how their employees are feeling. What it is a simple question: how likely are you to recommend this organization as a great place to work? And if you ask this to your employees, let them answer on a scale 0 to 10 or 1 to 5, doesn't matter, pick your poison. And if you ask this periodically, it will give you a good idea of who are or how many promoters and detractors you have in your company, and it will just help you plan better. So it's a great first metric to start. Just make sure that this is something that you're doing periodically and that you're also informing the team about the results of this survey and also what action will be taken based on those results. So a very key component to all this is feedback, as I had mentioned, collecting it, actioning it, and communicating that you're actioning it. So when it comes to feedback, it's really important to establish a culture where it's safe to give and receive feedback. And so what that could look like is establish a rule where in every one-on-one, both the manager and the employee give each other a piece of constructive feedback. And that way, employees will get used to the fact that giving and receiving feedback is something that's absolutely accepted at the company, and it's encouraged. And when it comes to actioning the feedback that's been received, it's again super important to communicate when there's a company change, a new process or new policy, to reiterate that you're implementing this because of what you had learned from a survey that you've done. So to wrap things up, your people are your most important asset, and ultimately, happy employees, engaged employees, employees that have good experience and trust in their company will lead to creating better business outcomes for the organization. Thank you so much. Please visit WFHomie and learn more about how we help companies understand, measure, and improve employee experience. Thank you.